In the summer of 2018, I traveled alone to Sutter's Island, a place so obscure you would need a magnifying glass to find it on a national map. I was not trying to escape anything in particular. I simply wanted a quiet place to finish the final chapter of my new book. Before I left, I told my editor, just give me 1 month. Wait for me to come back. August on the island meant the sky and the sea were a piercing, translucent blue. It should have been peak tourist season, but Sutter's Island was not a tourist destination. Few people knew it existed. I had booked my accommodation well in advance, the only youth hostel on the island, and paid for a full month up front. The boat ride to the island offered beautiful scenery, but I felt dizzy. I disliked the sensation of floating on the sea. It felt unmoored, uncertain. The boatman spoke very little, engaging in no communication with me throughout the journey, which I actually found quite liberating. Upon disembarking, I walked up the stone path. According to my research, the entire island had only a few thousand residents and rarely saw strangers. Before coming, I had chatted with the hostel owner online, curious why he would open a youth hostel in such a desolate place. He had replied, "For the fun of it. For the fun of it." I muttered to myself as I climbed a steep slope. Truly a rich man's game. I felt as though I were searching for a lost utopia. I walked for a while, panted for a while, and occasionally looked back to see the azure sea. By the time a thin layer of sweat coated my forehead, I finally arrived at the entrance of the hostel, simply named the Isle. That was where I first met Ronald. It was a day filled with abundant sunshine, and I had seen no one else on the road. The hostel's main gate was wide open, and standing outside, I immediately spotted a figure sitting in the courtyard. The courtyard was rustic and unique, so large that from the entrance, I could not see its boundaries. A man sat on a rattan lounge chair wearing a black t-shirt and floral shorts that screamed pirate style. He was barefoot, with an open book covering his face. I walked in, scanning the surroundings, unsure where the reception desk was located. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to the man, trying my best not to startle him. "Could you tell me where to check in?" Although I kept my voice soft, I still startled him. The book slid off his face, and he looked at me with displeasure. This was our first meeting. He gave me a scowl, and I had no good impression of him either. The man before me, with slightly long and messy hair, glanced at me with sharp eyes, as if too lazy to answer. He pointed casually in a vague direction. I noticed a small mole on his cheek, and my immediate thought was, I hate men with moles on their faces. Just as I had gathered before coming, this place was virtually deserted. Following the man's gesture, I walked into a small room and finally saw someone who might be the owner. A young woman, also wearing a t-shirt and shorts, sat leisurely by the window strumming a guitar. "Hello," I asked her. "Is this where I check in?" She looked at me and nodded. I sighed in relief and handed her my ID card. "I made a reservation online for a month." The girl smiled lightly. "You need to find him. He's the owner." She waved her finger, and I followed her gaze to see a man lying face up on the table like a corpse, clearly having drunk himself into oblivion early in the morning. "George," the girl shouted. "Wake up and get to work." The corpse had no reaction. The girl comforted me. "It's okay, watch this." She put down her guitar, slipped on her sandals, walked over, and slapped the corpse right on the forehead. "Get up." George finally reacted, climbing up groggily, his eyes barely opening. "Hello, owner," I said. "I contacted you yesterday." The drunken George reacted slowly, so slowly I thought he had fallen asleep again. This owner clearly lacked the sober mind and coordinated limbs to process my check-in. I began to doubt whether paying for a month in advance was the correct decision. I waited patiently, then watched this pile of mud wave his arm loosely. "Find Ronald." I was annoyed. I thought perhaps I should ask for a refund and leave early. But just then, the sound of flip-flops dragging on the ground came from the door, a sound that revealed its owner's impatience. I turned to look. The sour-faced man from the courtyard walked in lazily and stood before the computer at the bar counter. Obviously, he was the Ronald the owner mentioned. And obviously, he knew the owner was incapacitated, so why hadn't he just come in with me earlier? "Name," he grunted. "Charles." "Gender." "Can't you tell?" I retorted. He looked up at me and held out his hand. "ID." If he was going to take the ID anyway, why ask the nonsense questions? Reluctantly, I tossed my ID onto the table. He glanced at me, picked it up, and unwillingly processed my check-in. "Third floor, end of the hall," he said. "Can I?" "No." He cut me off before I could make a request. This man's face had "stay if you want, leave if you don't" written all over it. I decided to be stubborn. I took back my ID and key and went straight upstairs. On my first day, the island was beautiful, but the people were annoying. I thought to myself, stay away from them, enjoy the scenery quietly, and write my book in peace. But I did not know that the quiet and peace I expected had already become bubbles waiting to burst. No one here was a simple character. My impression of this hostel was terrible, but not because of the environment. Honestly, this was the one time I had seen a place match its advertisement exactly, down to the lazy cat sleeping on the wooden steps. I hated it solely because of the people downstairs. I stomped up the stairs, the wood creaking beneath my feet, making me suspect the owner was too cheap to repair the stairs properly. I resolved to go downstairs as little as possible for the next month. Reaching the third floor, I looked down the hallway. It wasn't long, with only a few rooms. I walked in. Rooms were on my right, windows on my left. Looking out, the turquoise seawater felt like it was right at the doorstep. The environment was indeed good. I accepted my fate. Having lived in the noisy city for so long, this really was a secluded paradise. Even if paradise had some terrible people, the flaws did not obscure the jade. I stood in the hallway admiring the view for a while, then continued to the end to find my room. A wooden sign hung on the door. Paid. Well, of course, it was paid. If I hadn't seen the non-refundable policy when paying, I wouldn't be standing here now. I unlocked the door. The room was clean, with rustic decor, yet everything looked new. I put down my suitcase and opened the window to air it out. Immediately, I saw the guy in the black t-shirt standing in the courtyard, fiddling with a kite that looked like it would never fly. I looked down at him, and he happened to look up. I have a writer friend who writes crime novels. He once lectured me for 3 days on criminal psychology. Different professions are like different worlds. I wasn't that interested in the psychology of criminals, letting it go in one ear and out the other. But when I locked eyes with this guy, I felt he had knives in his eyes and a gun in his heart. If born killers had a designated facial standard, I felt it must be his look. Not that he was ugly. Many psychopathic criminals are quite good-looking. It was just that they emitted a strange aura of arrogance, conceit, and suspicion. I hated him. I was certain. I didn't want any more eye contact, feeling as if the kite in his hand might shoot a poison arrow at me the next second. I knew I was overthinking, but I couldn't deny the feeling he gave me. I closed the window and began to unpack. Regarding my upcoming hermit life, I suddenly felt uneasy. The room's landline rang abruptly, startling me. The cell signal here was terrible, as the owner had warned, but every room had a landline. I had just arrived. I didn't even know the number, so who would call? The phone rang 3 times before I picked it up. Not out of curiosity, but because it was too noisy. "It's your turn to cook today," the voice on the phone said. "You're lucky. There are only 4 of us for lunch." I was confused. "What are you talking about? And who is this?" The person yawned lazily and added, "Island rules. Guests take turns cooking. 1 person a day. Today is you." I had just arrived. Was this a joke? I recognized the voice as the black t-shirt guy. Assuming he was pranking me, I hung up unhappily. A moment later, someone knocked on the door. It was the girl I met downstairs. She smiled at me and asked, "What are we eating for lunch today? Are you sure you aren't messing with me? Since when do hostel guests have to cook for everyone?" This girl seemed much more likable than that guy. At least her face looked gentle and kind. "Didn't you see it?" she asked. "See what?" "The blackboard downstairs has the duty roster." The last time I heard the words duty roster was in high school, over a decade ago. She patted my shoulder. "Come downstairs. It's almost noon, and everyone is starving." She went down ahead of me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, then heard something tapping against my window. I opened it to find the black t-shirt guy's kite caught on my ledge. Did he have a problem? The girl was already downstairs, standing next to him, calling up to me. Helpless, I decided to go down and see what was going on. Descending the stairs, I saw the lazy cat again. It didn't give me a glance. Clearly, it wasn't hungry. I arrived downstairs and saw the blackboard in the courtyard. It listed several names: George, Ronald, Sam, Ethan, Zoe, Lucas, new guy. I was the new guy. You make 7, the girl said, pointing to Zoe. That's me. She pointed to the first name. Owner George. I nodded, not really caring. This one. Her finger landed on Ronald. Just as my gaze shifted there, the broken kite fell on my head. Zoe laughed uncontrollably and said to me, "The handsome guy playing with the kite is Ronald. We are all long-term residents here." Handsome guy. I suppressed my anger, thinking I would eventually need to punch this kid to feel better. That day, I really did make lunch for them. Gnashing my teeth, I boiled a huge pot of instant noodles without adding the seasoning packets. I was angry. No one told me I had to cook before I came. Furthermore, you couldn't order takeout here. Even if they had this rule, why couldn't they give me a buffer of a few days? Forcing me to cook while I was still seasick felt like bullying. However, I didn't intentionally cook badly. I just hadn't cooked anything other than instant noodles in my life. Distracted by my anger, I accidentally threw the seasoning packets away with the trash. I placed a large pot of clear noodle soup on the table in the courtyard. Eat. Zoe looked at it and stood up. Brother, are you planning to add the seasoning when we eat? No, I said. I threw the seasoning packets away. I heard Ronald laughing from the side, a wild, arrogant laugh. He said sarcastically, "Cooking noodles and pulling a dark move like that. You're something else." I didn't bother arguing with him. Eat it or don't. Zoe stared at the pot of noodles and said, "It's fine. It's edible. I remember there's chili sauce George made in the fridge." She went to get the sauce. I sat to the side. Ronald finally put down his kite, washed his hands at the courtyard sink, and flicked the water as he walked over. This person was annoying. I saw that clearly now. He deliberately flicked water in my direction, droplets splattering on my face. "If you have a problem with me, say it," I said. "From now on, let's just avoid each other." He had a problem with me, and I couldn't stand him. Some people are just like that. Nothing needs to happen. Just a collision of glances is enough to know you aren't on the same path. Even in death, you wouldn't walk the same road to the afterlife. Ronald didn't answer. He picked up a bowl and served himself noodles. That meal was passable, mainly because the owner's chili sauce was good. While eating, I considered paying extra money so that when my turn came, I could hire George to cook. It would make me relaxed and everyone else comfortable. I didn't mention it then because George hadn't sobered up yet. I didn't understand how someone could be that drunk in broad daylight. On my first afternoon on Sutter's Island, wanting to avoid annoyance, I grabbed my bag and camera and went out. The island was sparsely populated and quiet. I could find peace in any corner. Walking down the slope toward the coast, I could hear the waves crashing. For someone like me who grew up inland, seeing mountains more than water, the ocean was a new world. Seeing the sea broadened my heart. Previously, beaches I visited were crowded with people, especially children on vacation, which was a disaster. But this place was good. Except for me, there was no one. I took off my shoes and stepped on the soft sand. Walking forward a few steps, I looked back at my footprints, watching them be erased by the incoming tide. I turned around and walked backward, thinking about how my book's protagonist should exit the stage. I've been writing for several years. I wouldn't say my published works are bestsellers, but my signings are never empty. My books have mostly been the same genre, old wine in new bottles, and readers were seeing the same stories. So this time, I wanted a breakthrough. I tried dual narrative for the first time, intersecting timelines. It risked being seen as showing off, but I wanted to slap the faces of those who called my work toilet reading. The writing had gone smoothly until the end. My editor and friends said it would be my most successful work. Perhaps because expectations were so high, I became anxious near the end, writing 100 words only to delete 1,000. I knew this couldn't continue. So, before I ruined everything, I told my editor I needed to hide away. I felt Sutter's Island could give me inspiration. Walking backward step by step, thinking deeply, I suddenly bumped into someone. The island's summer wasn't as scorching as the city. The heat carried a tenderness. When I bumped into the person, I only felt the damp scent of the ocean on them. Instantly, every pore on my body opened. I figured out how the protagonist should die. Just as I was about to turn around to apologize or say thanks, I heard a vaguely familiar voice say, "TSK, you stepped on my foot. Damn. Why didn't I step harder?" "Sorry, didn't see you," I said. I turned, stepped around him, and walked away without looking sideways. I thought ignoring him would end it, but he spoke up. You didn't put seasoning in the noodles at lunch on purpose, did you? I pretended not to hear, walking with large strides. But walking on soft sand made my large strides look foolish. He followed, hands stuffed in the pockets of his floral shorts. I knew without looking that he had a punchable grin on his face. Excuse me, sir, who are you? I asked, fed up. I came for inspiration, not to meet a play god. He tilted his head, squinting at me. The sea breeze messed up his hair. He always looked like he hadn't woken up, or rather, like a fool drunk on cheap liquor. He stared at me for a few seconds and smiled. Don't recognize me? I was pretending. I just didn't want to deal with him. I thought islanders would be simple and kind, not troublesome. You know me? I asked. He chuckled, even more annoying now. I certainly do. You stepped on my foot just now. I didn't know what he was doing here and didn't want to engage further. I mumbled sorry then and hurried away. I wasn't afraid of him. I was annoyed by him. I went to the other side of the beach, far away. He turned from a person into a blurry shadow. That was fine. Even if he ran naked on the beach, I wouldn't see clearly. And I didn't want to see. Finally finding peace, I sat down and closed my eyes to feel the breeze. My mind continued on the plot, the protagonist's path becoming clearer. I got so lost in thought that I unconsciously lay down on the sand. The sand was too soft and warm. I fell asleep without realizing it. The waves continued. The wind continued. The sun overhead showed no mercy. I didn't know how long I slept, but I woke with a start when water splashed on my face. You really aren't afraid of dying. I heard the voice and turned. That Ronald was simply a ghost, and I was the unlucky guy haunted in broad daylight. Why are you still here? I asked. And how did he drift next to me again? At this moment, he had taken off his black t-shirt, bare-chested. His loose floral shorts were wet. He lay not far from me, arms spread, legs crossed. Lucky I was here, he said. Otherwise, you'd be dried into a salted fish today. I hated being called a salted fish. I was very ambitious. I ignored him, rolled my eyes, and looked at the sky. The sky was so clean it had nothing but blue. I tried to find a bird and failed. I reached into my bag for headphones to listen to music. Just as I pulled them out, I heard someone humming nearby. Ronald was singing Simple Man. Although I disliked him, I had to admit the few lines he hummed sounded good. I gripped my headphones, listening, but he stopped after a few lines. I turned to look at him and found him looking at me slyly. For a moment, I felt like a thief caught red-handed and felt inexplicably guilty. I quickly put on my headphones and searched for a song on my phone. When music finally played, reassuring me, Ronald got up and came to my side. He was sweating a thin layer that glistened in the sunlight. He squatted beside me, looking down. As he asked, "What are you listening to?" This annoying person took one of my earbuds. At that moment, I was certain I wanted to die of embarrassment. Because just 30 seconds prior, I had specifically searched for Simple Man to listen to. However, Ronald didn't say much this time. He didn't try to embarrass me. He simply sat beside me and listened to the song properly. Mama told me when I was young / come sit beside me, my only son. The original singer's voice was distinctly different from Ronald's. The recording was polished and soulful, whereas Ronald's voice was lower, singing casually, completely disregarding the listener's feelings. But for some reason, listening to the track, I actually missed the few lines Ronald had messed around with. I turned off the music, took back the earbud, and gathered my things to go back to sleep. "You are John Doe," Ronald said suddenly. "I am Richard Rowe. Are you sick?" I asked. Ronald lay back on the sand laughing, and I really couldn't understand what he was laughing about. My first night at the Isle was not peaceful. After returning from the beach, I slept through the afternoon until evening. Waking up, I opened the window to a violet sunset, so beautiful I felt removed from the mortal world. Enjoying the view, I saw that broken kite again. I closed the window. Out of sight, out of mind. As the room dimmed, I turned on the light and took out my notebook and pen. I usually typed on a computer, but this time I wanted to return to basics, writing the final chapter by hand. I felt the effect might be better. The last chapter, projected at 10,000 words, would give the protagonist a perfect ending. His perfection was death. In this story, the protagonist's death was the ultimate curtain call, a heavy punch to a filthy life, So the method of death had to be profound and powerful. Sitting at the desk, the protagonist's image floated before my eyes. His appearance was specific yet blurry to me. I knew his brows, height, weight, and scars, but I would never project a real person onto him. That would make it impossible to write. My protagonist was the ultimate hero, one who couldn't exist in reality. I wrote a paragraph, about 200 words, and my hand cramped. Humans really do devolve. In school, I wrote 800-word essays by hand easily. Now I was melodramatic, giving up after 200 words. I reread the text, satisfied. Today's work was done. If my editor knew I wrote only 200 words a day, she might plan a murder-suicide. Around 6:30, the room phone rang. It was Zoe. "Come down for dinner," she said. Only then did I remember I was on duty. Everyone must have been unhappy with lunch, and since I filter out unhappy things, I filtered out that I had to cook dinner too. I rarely held grudges, except against those online critics calling my work trash. Sorry, I was working and forgot. It was an excuse, but a necessary one. Zoe laughed. "It's all made. Just come down." I was surprised. Did someone swap shifts? Or was the duty thing a prank all along? I went downstairs suspicious, ready to argue if they were pranking me. I saw the food on the courtyard table. Proper food, not my instant noodle disaster. A man smoked with his back to us outside the gate. Zoe was teasing the cat. George looked back at me. "Sorry, who are you?" This guy really drank until his film broke. Zoe explained I was Charles, the new guest. George grabbed a bottle of wine from the cabinet. "Want a glass?" "No thanks." My gaze scanned to Ronald, sitting like a pile of mud on a chair, legs crossed. "Crossing your legs causes blood clots," I said. Ronald turned to look at me. I pulled out a chair, debating where to sit. Not next to him. Not opposite him. "Really?" Ronald drawled. I thought it just affected sperm count. I rolled my eyes, labeling him vulgar. "We ate dinner, 5 of us." I asked Zoe, "Is the duty roster real?" "Real," Zoe said. "Then tonight." Oh, Zoe realized. Tonight's meal was made by George. He sobered up and said, "Since you just arrived, you should rest. He covered for you." I looked gratefully at George. Although he seemed dazed all day, he must be a decent person. Or so I thought. Long after, I learned Ronald actually cooked that meal, and the line "rest, I'll cover him" was his. Doing good deeds without leaving a name. This kid was something else. I was prejudiced against Ronald for 2 main reasons. First, the terrible first impression. Second, his restless hands and mouth. I was picky about friends. Conversation had to flow, and they couldn't have low tastes. Ronald and I didn't click, and he reveled in low tastes. He didn't harass people, but his mouth was cheap. I didn't like listening to him. Because I had no good impression, I ignored him, mostly hiding in my room. Writing depends on fate. When fate was absent, I opened the window for human observation. I observed that the residents called themselves islanders. Lucas, the shortest resident at over a month, claimed to be a wandering poet. I had no prejudice against poets, but Lucas's poems were baffling. I assumed he must be a genius, based on the logic that if I didn't understand it, it was too advanced for my shallow mind. Lucas loved smoking with his back to the gate. I estimated a pack a day. Sometimes I warned him, "Brother, remember your annual physical." The longest resident, besides George, was Ronald. Learning Ronald had lived at the Isle for 3 years, I suspected he planned to outlive the alcoholic George and inherit the hostel. Does he think this is his house? I asked Zoe, who fed me gossip. Pretty much. Zoe sat on the stairs strumming her guitar. She used to be a guitarist in a hot rock band until the lead singer cheated on her. She beat him up, sealed her heart, and became an islander. A cool girl. "Teach me guitar," I asked her. Truly, not to flirt, but to learn a skill to show off later. Plus, free lessons from a pro. I was vain and calculating like that. "Ask Ronald, he knows how," Zoe said. "My techniques are passed only to women." Ronald walked past with his kite. "Him? He probably plays cotton." "Don't underestimate him," Zoe laughed. "That guy has substance." I looked at Ronald looking like a fool with his kite in the courtyard. The butterfly kite tangled in the crooked tree as soon as it flew. Is he obsessed with kites? I asked. "Why is he always flying that broken thing?" "That's not flying a kite," Zoe said. "He calls it catching butterflies. It's performance art." Performance art? I thought he was sick. Give it 6 months, he'll go mad. Zoe laughed, strumming loudly. Ronald glanced over, looking at Zoe like she was the fool. He looks at you like you're an idiot. I instigated. He's looking at you, Zoe said. No normal people here. I walked away, hearing Ronald shout, John Doe. Catching butterflies? You're the John Doe. I shouted back. You're an outlaw destined for the asylum. Ronald didn't get angry, holding an unlit cigarette, flying his kite. The butterfly flew over my head, fluttering so realistically I hallucinated it was real for a second. Sick. I scolded myself. George shouted from behind. Chun Jun. Drink. My name is Charles. Was there anyone normal here? Another reason I rejected Ronald. I hated his use of catching butterflies. My favorite writer, Nabokov, loved studying butterflies. I treasured a photo of him with a net. I used this metaphor in my books. Now, I felt Ronald's behavior offended me. I knew I couldn't blame him. I was being dramatic, but I felt he was a literate imposter. I wrote this in my diary. This diary, started upon arrival, was to record everything here. Naturally, Ronald occupied a large portion. If the diary had a protagonist, he was the male lead. The hero, of course, was me. Later, rereading it, I realized the diary could be titled The Manual of Charles Slapping His Own Face. Back then, I thought Ronald was an annoying illiterate. Being petty, feeling he offended my literary idol, I took a Nabokov book to the courtyard the next day to show off. I sat on Ronald's lounge chair, sunbathing and reading Speak, Memory. The cover featured a boy looking at butterflies. I intended to imply Ronald should stop chasing clout. When Ronald suddenly approached, I dropped the book. What are you doing? I was startled. He had changed into another black t-shirt and floral shorts, holding the butterfly kite, looking at me with that half-dead expression. Thought you were asleep, Ronald said. I almost was. The sun was too comfortable. Ronald bent down, picked up the book, and handed it back. As he returned it, he said pretentiously, in the Basque language, butterfly is misericordia. I froze. Ronald dropped that sentence and went back to flying his kite. A few seconds later, I frantically flipped through the book, realizing the sentence was from the very book I held. And Ronald had pronounced that strange word. You read Nabokov? I asked. Nahu, he said. Oh, the cellist? I know her. My native language turned from English to speechless. I got up to leave, thinking I could never communicate with Ronald. But as I walked away, I heard him say loudly, You are the countless small arrows. Every arrow hit me. I stopped, surprised he stole my line. Of course, it wasn't my line. It was Nabokov writing to his wife, Vera. But I had memorized it and once posted on Weibo. When I confessed to my beloved, I will say this. I turned to Ronald. Maybe he wasn't the illiterate I imagined. What did you say? He pointed to his low-flying kite. I'm chatting with this guy. Crazy. I shouldn't have engaged. I walked angrily upstairs, hearing him add, My light of life, my fire of my loins. I covered my ears. But I still heard Ronald's laugh. In broad daylight, it was creepy. In my first week, I treated Ronald as an annoying rogue. Every word he said grated on me. But sometimes, clashing auras spark inspiration. I noted in my notebook to add a villain to my story, a cunning, insidious character. I planned to give him Ronald's physical traits, like the mole. Subjective consciousness changes everything. Back then, I thought the mole made him look stupid and ugly. Not long after, I found it incredibly sexy. My relationship with Ronald began to change in the second week. It was Ronald's turn to cook. People can't escape their habits. Like a writer's style, personal quirks are hard to hide. I spotted the trick immediately. I had sampled everyone's cooking. George was a god when sober. The genius poet Lucas was pathetic. His food was worse than mine. Others were passable. But having missed Ronald's actual turn before, I believed Zoe that George covered for me. Later, I realized George was too drunk to cook that well. Ronald's cooking had a distinct character I couldn't describe, but I could taste it. I felt guilty eating that meal, finishing 3 bowls out of nervousness. I pondered how to investigate, not wanting to owe him a favor. Thinking downstairs, I got sleepy. I went up to nap, but saw Ronald leaning by the hallway window, unlit cigarette in mouth. He wore the same outfit. I suspected he had 20 identical shirts and shorts. The wind messed his hair. He rested elbows on the frame, glancing lazily at me. The sun hit his profile. I thought he'd get a tan line. I walked over, intending to ignore him. But as I passed, he suddenly extended a long leg, blocking my path. The hall was narrow. "Tisk," I said. "What's your problem now?" He smiled, eyes narrowing mischievously. "Your neck is tilting forward. Yours is." I straightened up, showing him perfect posture. Ronald smiled brilliantly, annoyingly. He leaned in, fingers landing on my neck, pressing hard on a specific joint. "Tisk, so stiff," he said. "Suggest you exercise more." The moment his fingers touched, my pores opened. The sea breeze poured into my body, churning my blood. I froze for a second. His grip was strong. Honestly, it felt good. But my fragile nerves wouldn't allow me to linger. I awkwardly turned sideways, dodging his touch. "I have a regular masseur, don't worry about it." I walked quickly to my room. Closing the door, I heard Ronald laugh, realizing I had just walked with same-side arm and leg coordination. I knew I was being frivolous, but I couldn't understand why I was so thirsty. Even Ronald could trigger my spring heart. I locked the door and threw myself on the bed. Closing my eyes, Ronald's dangling, half-dead ghost face appeared, flicking my forehead. Suddenly, a knock. Outside, Ronald said, "Your underwear hanging by the window fell downstairs." Shit. I looked at the window. My Pikachu underwear was gone. The fall of the Pikachu underwear was the catalyst for the shift in our relationship. I cherish my dignity. No one knew that beneath my breezy, talented exterior lay a heart that collected cartoon underwear. This was a secret to be taken to the grave. Normally, I'd threaten a witness. But I collapsed. I rushed out to retrieve them. They were hanging on Ronald's kite. "You did this on purpose, right?" I accused Ronald. "Is there something wrong with you?" he retorted. Okay, maybe I framed him. But he cursed back, so we were even. I guessed I was mortified. The underwear was hot to the touch. I stuffed it in my pocket and turned to leave. "No thank you," Ronald asked behind me. "I wanted to kill you. It fell out itself. I didn't steal it," Ronald laughed. "But it's pretty cute. If I posted this online, thousands would cyberbully this foul-mouthed man for me." I turned. "Do you know you've committed sexual harassment?" Ronald leaned against a tree with his kite, smiling. "Sorry." He apologized. The attitude was passable. I prepared to forgive him. But as I turned, he added, "You can harass me back." "Sorry, no interest." I rolled my eyes and left. Because of the shame, I didn't leave my room for 3 days. Naturally, I wrote nothing, lying in bed staring at the ceiling thinking, I shouldn't have come. For 3 days, Ronald acted like a delivery man, bringing every meal to my door. "Eat," he'd knock. Not eating. Starve me to death. But after he left, I'd sneak the food in, eat, and put the empty dishes back. My behavior was shameful, but I was a rotten person. Who could stop me? I thought the second week would pass like this. But on Thursday night, something happened that shocked both me and Ronald. It was George's birthday. A drunkard's birthday meant chaos. George insisted on a bonfire in the courtyard. Everyone surrounded the fire drinking beer. My tolerance was average. Sitting between Zoe and Lucas, with Ronald diagonally across, the fire turned us all red. In the summer night, I was sweating. George brought out 2 cases of cold beer. "Does George ever sober up?" I asked Zoe. "Almost never," she said. "But look how happy he is." I invented a tragic backstory for George. People would call me melodramatic online. I got angry at the imaginary critics. I was a tough guy. "What are you thinking about?" Zoe asked, holding a full bottle. "Cheers. Sister, straight from the bottle?" "How else?" These islanders drank heroically. I chugged along, competitive spirit flaring. I drank until I was top-heavy, running to the bathroom constantly. At some point, Zoe next to me turned into Ronald. Seeing his face, I reached out and slapped it drunkenly. "Zoe, why are you wearing such an ugly mask?" My hand was grabbed tightly. Touching my face without permission, isn't that sexual harassment? I stared at him. The firelight made Ronald look like a flame. I had finished my second bottle, my limit was 1. My stomach was bloated, head spinning. "Come closer," I told him. Ronald leaned in. Our noses almost touched. I raised my other hand and did something I'd wanted to do while sober. I picked at the mole on his face. Then, Ronald flicked my forehead hard. I was stunned. "Why are you so annoying?" he asked. I couldn't understand his audacity. But my tongue was numb, so I lost the argument. Half of Ronald's face was red from the firelight. My face felt like it was burning. Too hot, I said. What do you expect? It's a bonfire. I tried to stand up, but fate decreed I would embarrass myself. I fell into Ronald's arms. Zoe later described it. You both stood up. Ronald didn't touch you. You threw yourself into his arms. I was unhappy with that description, but Zoe had photos. In the photo, Ronald stood straight with hands in pockets, and I clung to his chest like mud. Zooming in, Ronald was smiling smugly. That was my first intimate contact. He later dragged me by the neck like a pig to a lounge chair. Everyone drank until they lost track of time. Lying dizzy, I saw Lucas the poet kissing Ethan the mechanic. I nudged the person next to me. Hey, look at those two. I realized too late I was nudging Ronald. He was drinking from a bottle. I heard him say, "What? You want to try?" I don't remember my answer, but that night, I engaged in drunken misconduct. We kissed. To me, this severity was equivalent to losing my virginity. When Ronald kissed me, I was dizzy. His lips were hot and dry. I remember clearly extending my tongue to lick his lip and instantly going numb. But the next day, Ronald claimed he didn't kiss me, that I hallucinated it. Ronald's words were 2 parts truth, 8 parts lies. I didn't believe him. The sensation was too real. I lay paralyzed on the chair. He leaned over. We stared until I went cross-eyed. Then I closed my eyes, and he kissed me. Dog wanting to renege on a debt. I asked Zoe, "Did you take other photos?" "You mean of you seducing Ronald?" "Sister, I didn't seduce him. He forced a kiss on me." Zoe handed me her camera. "Don't delete anything." Her battery was dead. I took the memory card and ran to my room, bumping into Ronald on the way. I glared at him. He said to Zoe behind me, "Did my not kissing him cause him that much damage?" I checked the photos on my laptop. Hundreds of blurry images. Finally, I found it, the evidence of me seducing Ronald. There were a dozen photos. Me clinging to Ronald. And my so-called kiss was actually me licking his finger while his lips were near my ear. I looked completely satisfied. Thunderstruck. I hoped the Layphone pagoda would collapse on me. My editor called. "Charles, how is the writing?" "I don't want to live anymore," I said. "Don't be pressured." "Take your time," she panicked. "Okay, I'll die after I finish." "No. Your next book is signed with us too." After hanging up, my head split. Ronald must be so smug. My window was knocked. Ronald's kite again. I didn't want to open it, but he called my room phone. "Open the window." I opened it. The kite hung there with a note. "Going to the beach. Coming?" Using notes in this era? I glanced at him down below. What for? I saw his Adam's apple bob. Sexy. Men's sexiest parts. Long eyes, clear Adam's apple. He had both. But the mole ruined it. I closed the window, rejecting him. In the afternoon, I returned the card to Zoe. "How's my photography?" she asked. "Maybe I don't want to live." She laughed. I wandered around, bored. I avoided the beach, walking the alleys instead. An old lady gave me a bouquet of unknown flowers. Holding them, I felt better, forgetting my shame. Walking back down the slope, I saw someone coming up. Black t-shirt, floral shorts, holding that kite. We looked at each other. The wind blew the kite. I walked toward him. The sea breeze was gentle. I passed him, pretending not to know him. I expected a snarky comment, but he passed silently. However, as we brushed shoulders, his hand quickly plucked a flower from my bouquet. I turned. In the orange sunset, Ronald smiled softly and tucked the flower behind his ear. I stood there, replaying the scene of Ronald with the flower walking away. The sunset light, the wind lifting his shirt. It was beautiful. Near dark, I went to the beach with the flowers. To push Ronald out of my mind, I thought about my plot. I took out my recorder. When he died, pale yellow daisy petals floated on the sea. Wait, the flower Ronald took was a yellow daisy. I lay on the beach, distracted, and didn't notice the tide rising until water hit my face. It was dark. The waves were aggressive. My flowers were scattered. Trying to get up, I slipped. Fuck, I heard behind me. Someone grabbed me and dragged me back. "Ronald, what the hell are you doing?" he frowned. I choked on water. I coughed. "Are you that upset about being called a literary failure?" "Suicide. I wasn't committing suicide. I got swept in." He threw me one of his shoes. "Borrow one. Just one." Take it or leave it. He walked ahead, limping slightly. I saw blood on his calf. He stopped and threw the other shoe. Cleaned them before returning. I followed him. The moonlight hit him. Wet shorts, bleeding leg, walking like a lord. Wait, I said. How did you know I'm a writer? He froze. I don't know. You called me a literary failure. He turned. You didn't know? Know what? Never mind. He walked away fast. Back in my room, I showered. Someone knocked. Ronald, hair wet, fresh clothes. Shoulder, he pointed. My left shoulder was bruised. Probably hit something. Give me the shoes. I washed them in the bathroom. Through the mirror, I saw him leaning against the door frame, watching me. We locked eyes in the mirror. Your towel dropped, he said. I slammed the bathroom door. Later that night, unable to sleep, I wrote the suicide scene for my protagonist. It flowed perfectly. The next morning, I saw Ronald walking back with a bunch of flowers. I went out later and found a bouquet at my door. Ronald. I put them inside. Downstairs, Ronald was sleeping in the courtyard with a book on his face. Nabokov's butterflies. I stared at him. The sun hit his hair, and I smelled flowers. A butterfly effect? Zoe banged a gong for lunch, waking us both. I ate distractedly and ran to the roof. Ronald followed. Why run? He asked, sitting next to me. Who's running? You sent me flowers. Like them? There? Okay. He lay back. You know why I call you John Doe and me Richard Rowe? Who knows? Names are just codes. You can be Charles or Ronald. Or anyone. He turned to me. We are the most ordinary people in the universe. We can pursue perfection, but don't lose everything for a name. He leaned closer. Repeat what I said. Or what? Punishment. Yes. I'm not afraid. Really. He pulled my head toward him. In the salty wind, we kissed. He pushed me onto the chair. His kissing technique was beyond imagination. I was the butterfly caught by the snake. I surrendered. He stopped, looking down at me. How was it? I couldn't speak. He wiped my mouth. Red. Stay there, he said, getting up and leaving. I was confused. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard him laughing with others outside. He looked at my window. Late at night, I opened the window. His window opened too. Good night, he called. Sleep fast. The next morning, I paced outside his room. Ethan yelled at me. Ronald came out, smirked, and led me downstairs. Beer, he offered at 8 a.m. Learn something good. He sat in the courtyard. My legs look good. Harry, I think your leg hair is sexy. He was flirting. Want a touch? I offered, trying to outplay him. Sure. He grabbed my waist and pulled me onto the lounge chair. He leaned down, nose touching my leg. What are you doing? I scrambled away. Public indecency. No one's here. Zoe walked in. Kenneth Charles. Pretty open of you. I fled to the beach. I lay on the sand, imagining Ronald walking into the sea. I woke up to a bouquet of flowers beside me. A note. She could fade, wither, anything, but one look at her, and all tenderness floods my heart. Nabokov. I looked around. A butterfly kite flew in the distance. I walked toward it. Ronald sat there, flying it. I walked up and stood between his legs. Thanks, he said. Thanks to you too. I put the flowers down. He touched my knee. I burned. You're seducing me, he whispered. Who seduced who? He pulled me down for a kiss. This one was slow, tender. Where are you touching? He asked. My hand was on his abs. Like it. He pulled me behind a large rock. Scared, he licked my ear. We writers are bold. You write erotica? Yes. He kissed me hard. Write this down. We were reckless behind that rock. I touched his burning ears. You aren't a cold type, he said. Today, Pikachu again? Shut up. He pulled out condoms and lube from under a rock. No, from his pocket. Prepared. Always. We made love on the beach. It hurt, then it didn't. I cried, and he licked my tears. Loud, he noted. You went hard. I countered. You owe me. I owe you nothing. He took his shirt and kite and walked away. One time, I walked back, confused but smiling. Back at the hostel, he played guitar. Simple man. He didn't look at me. I washed up. He played the fairy at my door. That's your tip, he said. Come to my room tonight if you want more. I went. He had flowers in his room. Attracting butterflies? Smart. He played guitar. I saw a book on his pillow, Barking Night. My book. Coincidence, same name as you, he teased. I want his signature. Please me. We kissed. I nailed my shadow to his wall. He quoted my ending. We had sex again. This time in a bed. It was better. Why are you here? He asked later, looking at the moon. To write. Living is interesting. Dying 1,000 ways isn't as fun as living well once. You're right. So live well, he said. I will. You too. I realized then, the ending of my book shouldn't be death. It should be living. I ran back to my room and rewrote the ending. Morning came. I looked out. Ronald stood in the sun. I loved him. My editor called. Manuscript. Done. Come back. Not yet. For days left. I hung up. Ronald sent another flower via kite. A white daisy. I went down. But I can fly it higher. I failed. You owe me a condition, he said. Promise to live well. I will. You too. Best be. He kissed me. Zoe and George saw. Kissing who? George slurred. No one, Zoe said. I left the island. On the boat, I sang. Back in the city, I felt empty. The ending changed, my editor said. You didn't kill him. No. Where did you go? Sutter's Island. The suicide island. What? Singer Liam killed himself there. His friend opened a hostel. I froze. Liang Dao. Liam. George's friend. I rushed to the airport. Panic. I arrived at the hostel at night. Silence. Ethan, Lucas, Zoe were there. Ronald lay on the chair. George was gone. Charles is back, Zoe said. Ronald hugged me hard. Why did you come back? Where is George? He went to find his lover. George committed suicide. We mourned. We scattered his ashes. Ronald told me his story. His mother's illness. His father leaving. Finding my dark book. Your book saved me. I wanted to see the dark author. I found a guy who argues with trolls. I'm your lifesaver. Yes. And I slept with you. No loss. Come with me, I said. I'll take you. Okay. He agreed. We packed. He had nothing but clothes and the kite. I'll buy you everything, I promised. Sugar daddy. We said goodbye to Zoe. She would stay and run the hostel. Thank you, she said. Thank you. We walked to the boat. I'm writing a romance novel, I said. About a scheming man hooking a genius writer. Ronald laughed. What did you find in your bag, he asked. A daisy. You know the meaning? I know. Hidden love. I held his hand. We left the island, but the kite string was in my hand forever.